I created this system from the ground up, so you can explain it to my daughter. My name is Michael, and I'm 42 years old. I've been the head database architect at Nexra Solutions here in Kansas City for over a decade. Every line of code that runs on our multi-billion-dollar financial data platform, it's all mine. From the client contracts to trading records, compliance reports, the intricate database structures that manage it all. This was my life. But sitting across from Mr. Whitfield that Tuesday morning, watching him talk about his 24-year-old daughter, Emily, like she was some kind of next-gen genius, I felt a chill in my chest. She was tapping away at her phone, glancing up occasionally, flashing a rehearsed smile. Emily just finished her MBA at Stanford, Whitfield continued, smoothing his tie. She's got fresh ideas. I think she's just the person we need to shake things up around here. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. What kind of timeline are we looking at for the transition? Whitfield leaned back in his chair, giving me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Fast. Emily's eager to jump in. She's already got a vision for modernizing our approach. Emily finally looked up from her phone. I was reading about AI integration in database management, she said, her voice light but certain. You guys are way behind the curve here, don't you think? I had spent the last 3 years running AI optimization protocols, implemented machine learning algorithms that saved Nexra millions annually. But I smiled, forced a chuckle. Always room for improvement. The meeting droned on for another 20 minutes. Whitfield spoke endlessly about generational perspectives while Emily asked questions that made it clear she couldn't distinguish between a database and an Excel sheet. When the meeting finally ended, I stood up and walked back to my office. My steps were steady, but something had shifted. In 12 years at Nexra, I'd never missed a deadline, never had a breach, never lost a single piece of client data. The platform I built processed billions in daily transactions across a dozen states, managing pension funds, insurance firms, banks. And now, they wanted to hand it all over to someone who thought SQL was a breakfast drink. I sat at my desk, staring at the architecture diagrams I'd spent years perfecting. Layers of interconnected databases, all secured by protocols I had written. Backup systems nested within backup systems. Redundancy checks running every few minutes. It was a masterpiece in its own right, but I'd built something else, buried deep within that architecture. A safety net, a fail-safe. I looked at the photo on my desk, a picture of my father and me on the day I graduated. He had always told me to build something that lasts. And I had. But now, lasting didn't seem to be enough. I had started at Nexra straight out of college when it was just a scrappy 15-person startup operating out of a rundown warehouse in the Crossroads district. Back then, Whitfield was different, hungry, focused, willing to put in the hard work. We worked 18-hour days, building something revolutionary. A financial data platform that could process real-time transactions while ensuring ironclad security. It was the kind of thing most people thought was impossible. But we did it. In those early days, we were a family. Whitfield would buy pizza for the team when we hit big milestones. He knew everyone's name, their kids' names. When my mom got sick, he gave me 2 months of paid leave without question. We were a small team, but we made it big. Nexra landed major contracts with pension funds, insurance companies, regional banks. By 2020, we were handling transactions across the Midwest, processing billions in daily revenue. But as the company grew, things began to change. Whitfield hired new executives, the kinds of people who wore expensive suits and talked about maximizing shareholder value. The old warehouse was replaced with a gleaming office tower downtown. The pizza nights? Gone. Whitfield became more distant. He started traveling more, delegating more, trusting spreadsheets and reports over instinct. Emily had been around the office since high school, working summer internships that mostly involved answering phones and organizing files. She was smart, sure, but she'd never shown any interest in the technical side of things. And yet now she was stepping into a role she had no business being in. Things had started to feel off a few weeks ago. Whitfield would walk past my office without stopping to chat. In meetings, he'd ask other people to explain decisions I had made. Small things, but I noticed. Then came the questions about documentation. We need everything written down, the new chief operating officer had said in a staff meeting. Institutional knowledge can't just live in one person's head. I had been documenting everything for years, but the way they asked, it made me wonder if they were really asking for the documents at all. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago when I discovered a security vulnerability in one of our client interfaces. It wasn't major, but it needed to be fixed immediately. I patched it up in 40 minutes and ran diagnostics, confirming everything was secure. The next day, Whitfield called me into his office. "Michael, we need to talk about protocol," he said, his voice tight. "When you make changes to the system, even small ones, you need approval first." "A security patch," I said, trying to stay calm. "Waiting for approval would have left us exposed." "I understand," Whitfield replied. But Emily raised some concerns about unauthorized modifications. It was clear what was happening. Emily had raised concerns about a security patch on a system she couldn't even access. That was when I knew. They weren't planning to work with me. They were planning to replace me. That afternoon, the email arrived. Subject line: Organizational restructuring confidential. Effective immediately, we will be implementing leadership changes in our technology division. Michael Ellis will be transitioning from his current role to provide consulting support during a knowledge transfer period. Emily Whitfield will assume responsibilities as Chief Database Officer. I read it twice, feeling the words sink into my gut like a cold stone. I pulled up the System Administrator panel and checked the access logs. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. New credentials had been created for Emily, granting her administrative privileges she hadn't earned, and more importantly, didn't understand. 12 years of 70-hour weeks. 12 years of perfect uptime. 12 years of building a system that processed billions in daily transactions, powering financial markets, insurance companies, and pension funds. And now, they were handing it all over to someone who didn't even know the difference between a database and a spreadsheet. I sat back, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the access logs. They were already positioning her to take control. I thought of my father's words, "Build something that lasts." And I had built something that lasted. But apparently that wasn't enough. 2 weeks went by, and I knew they were preparing for their little knowledge transfer. They scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. I arrived early, as always, and set up in conference room B, the one with the big windows overlooking the plaza where food trucks used to gather at lunch. I had printed out the system documentation, created flowcharts, and even included system diagrams to explain how the platform worked. Emily showed up 20 minutes late, holding a massive coffee cup and chatting loudly on her phone about weekend plans. Whitfield wasn't with her. Sorry, she said, flopping into the chair across from me. Traffic was insane. It wasn't. It was a Monday morning in Kansas City. Same as always. She opened her shiny new MacBook Pro, still wrapped in plastic. "So where do we start?" she asked. I started with the basics. Explained how our platform managed financial data for 47 major clients. Showed her how transactions flowed through various systems, how security protocols kept everything protected. She nodded along, typing notes occasionally, but I could tell she wasn't absorbing any of it. By the third slide, I knew she was lost. "This seems pretty complicated," she said after a while. "Do you think we could simplify it? Maybe use cloud storage or something?" Cloud storage for $850 million worth of regulated financial data? Couldn't help it. "The current architecture meets all federal compliance requirements," I said. "Moving to cloud infrastructure would require at least 18 months of regulatory approval." She jotted something down. "Look into cloud options. Save money." I spent the next few hours explaining basic system operations, how to monitor server health, run diagnostic reports, interpret error logs. Basic stuff that any new administrator learns in their first week on the job. "I think I'm getting it," she said around noon. "It's basically like a really big Excel spreadsheet, right?" I stared at her for a moment, stunned. "Not exactly." Later that afternoon, I got an email from Whitfield asking for a meeting. When I walked into his office, Emily was already there, her face flushed. "Michael," Whitfield began. Emily has some concerns about this morning's session. Oh, I said, keeping my voice calm. She feels like you're being deliberately obtuse, making things more complicated than they need to be. I glanced at Emily, who was staring down at her phone, avoiding eye contact. The system is complex because it handles complex operations, I said. I can't simplify federal compliance regulations just for training purposes. Emily looked up, her face scrunched in annoyance. He's doing it again, using all this technical jargon to make me feel stupid. Federal compliance regulations is technical jargon? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Whitfield leaned forward. Maybe we need to adjust our approach. Focus more on the high-level management side instead of the technical details. I shook my head. Managing a database requires understanding the technical details. Does it though? Whitfield asked, his voice tight. I mean, I don't understand the technical details, and I've been running this company for 15 years. You've been running the business side, I replied. The technical side has been running itself because the systems I built are robust and stable. Emily snorted. Systems can't run themselves. Actually, well-designed systems can run themselves, I said. That's the whole point of good architecture. Look, Whitfield said. We appreciate everything you've built here, but we need to think about the future. Emily brings fresh ideas and a modern perspective. Maybe it's time to consider new approaches. New approaches? I repeated, my voice tight. You mean approaches that could break a system that processes $2.3 billion in daily transactions without errors? Emily sat up, her eyes bright. Well, for starters, I think we should implement blockchain technology and maybe use some AI to automate the boring stuff. I stared at her. Blockchain? For an enterprise system like ours? I've been running AI optimization for 3 years, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. As for blockchain, that's like suggesting we tear down our building and rebuild it with Legos. Those are interesting ideas, I said. But have you researched the regulatory implications? Emily's smile faded just slightly. Not yet, but I'm sure we can figure it out. She was sure? She was sure she could figure out the regulatory implications of federal banking laws? I walked back to my office, sat down heavily in my chair. The weight of what was happening settled on me like a cold shroud. My years of hard work, my reputation, everything I'd built, none of it mattered. To them, I was just an obstacle, a liability. 2 days later, I was copying system documentation to an external drive when I noticed something strange in the server logs. Someone had been accessing administrative functions at odd hours, late nights, early mornings, weekends. Curious, I dug deeper into the access records. The credentials used didn't belong to anyone who should have had access to the core database modules. They belonged to Todd Brennan, our Chief Information Officer. I found email chains between Todd and an outside consulting firm called Zentron Global, discussing legacy system modernization and knowledge extraction protocols. They had been planning this, planning my replacement, but that wasn't all. I found a presentation buried in a subfolder titled Database Operations Transition. It was dated 6 weeks ago. The plan was simple. Phase 1, document existing systems. Phase 2, identify external resources for modernization. Phase 3, implement leadership transition. Phase 4, retire legacy architecture and personnel. Personnel. I was their legacy. I was being phased out. And the worst part? Slide 12 detailed the estimated cost savings from personnel reduction. $180,000 annually. My salary. They weren't bringing Emily in because she had fresh ideas. They were bringing her in because she was cheap. A recent MBA who would work for half my salary and never question their decisions. The technical complexity didn't matter. The perfect system I'd built didn't matter. They just wanted to save money. I printed the presentation and walked to my car, the weight of it all crashing down on me. I had given them everything, and they were discarding me like an outdated piece of software. But they didn't understand. They had no idea what I'd hidden in the system. That night, I worked late on my new laptop, not planning anything dramatic, but making sure I understood exactly how my own systems worked. The emergency protocols I had built were elegant in their simplicity. If anyone attempted to access core database functions without my biometric signature, the system would trigger total data protection protocols. I had designed it during the paranoid early days when we were working with sensitive government contracts. The idea was simple. Better to lose everything than let it fall into unauthorized hands. The system wouldn't discriminate. Whether the threat came from the outside or from within, it would protect itself. I had planned to disable those protocols before leaving to ensure a clean, safe transition. But now, knowing they had been planning to eliminate me for months, I decided otherwise. Friday morning arrived. I dressed carefully, wearing my best shirt and the tie my father had given me on my college graduation day. If this was going to be my last day at Nexera, I wanted to look professional. The morning passed quietly. I backed up my personal files, deleted my browser history. At 11 a.m., I walked to the server room for one final check. $850 million worth of financial data, all organized and protected by the systems I had perfected. It hummed along beautifully, as it always had. I ran my biometric scan one last time. Fingerprint recognition confirmed my identity as the authorized administrator. Everything was green. All systems were operational. The transition celebration started at 2 p.m. Whitfield made a speech about exciting new directions and fresh perspectives. Emily talked about her vision for modernizing our technological approach. Todd presented me with a plaque, thanking me for my years of dedicated service. Nobody mentioned they had been planning to fire me for months. At 3:30 p.m., Whitfield called me into his office for one final conversation. "Michael, this is hard for all of us," he began. "But we think it's time for you to move on to new challenges." "I understand," I said. "We'll provide excellent references, of course, and we're prepared to offer a generous severance package. 6 weeks of salary for 12 years of perfect service." "That's very kind," I said. Savannah was sitting in my chair when I walked back to my office. She was already logged into my computer, clicking through system menus with the confident air of someone who had no idea what she was looking at. "I think I'm getting the hang of this," she said brightly. I smiled. "I'm sure you'll do great." At 4:45 p.m., I packed up my desk. A few personal photos, some technical books, a coffee mug my nephew had given me for Christmas. I shook hands with my colleagues, accepted their awkward condolences, and walked out of the building for the last time. Savannah would attempt to modify core database settings to implement her new approaches at 5 p.m. At 5:01, the system would detect an unauthorized modification attempt. At 5:02, total data protection would activate. I drove home, waiting for the phone to ring. The call came at 5:17 p.m. I was sitting on my back porch, sipping a cold beer, watching the sunset when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen, Todd Brennan. "Michael," he said, his voice strained. "Thank God. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" I asked, pretending to sound concerned. "The system is down. Everything. The entire platform. It's offline." I took a slow sip of beer, letting the silence hang for a moment. "That's strange," I said casually. "Did you check the error logs?" "We can't access the error logs. We can't access anything. It's like the whole system just vanished." "Vanished?" Todd's panic was evident. In the background, I could hear people shouting, scrambling to fix the unfixable. "Have you tried the emergency recovery protocols?" I asked. "We can't find them." "Ah, of course," I said, leaning back in my chair, savoring the moment. Emily was trying to update some security settings, wasn't she? "Yeah. Everything just crashed after that." Security settings. Of course. I took another slow sip, letting the weight of it all settle in. "I'm sure it's just a temporary glitch. Have you contacted the backup data center?" "The backup systems are showing the same errors, Michael. $850 million worth of data is gone. Our clients are already calling. We need you to come in and fix this." I paused, looking at the setting sun. Felt fitting somehow, watching everything burn while I sat in peace. "I'm sorry, Todd," I said, my voice calm. But I don't work there anymore. Remember? There was a long silence. Then Todd spoke, desperation creeping into his voice. But you built these systems. You're the only one who knows how they work. I documented everything, I replied smoothly. Didn't Emily mention that during the knowledge transfer? Another long pause. Please, Michael, Todd begged. We need your help. I couldn't help the smile that crept onto my face. I wish I could help, but without authorized access credentials, there's nothing I can do. And since I'm no longer an employee, I let the sentence hang there. I hung up. The phone buzzed immediately. Whitfield. Michael, we need to talk. By Monday morning, the news had spread like wildfire throughout Kansas City's financial sector. Nexra Labs was in freefall. Industry analysts were calling it a catastrophic data loss. 47 major clients had been affected, and federal regulators were launching investigations. Nexra's stock had dropped 87% in just 3 days. I read about it in the Kansas City Star while eating breakfast at a diner near my house. The article quoted Whitfield, saying they were working around the clock to restore service. But anonymous sources hinted the data was completely unrecoverable. Not a single mention of unauthorized modifications to the system. Not a single word about Savannah's attempt to implement new security protocols without understanding the existing architecture. Just a tragic technology failure that no one could explain. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, the kind that only comes from seeing a carefully laid plan come to fruition. They had underestimated me. They thought they could replace me with someone who didn't understand the system, who hadn't spent years building it. They were wrong. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted comments. Former colleagues asked questions. Lawyers representing angry clients. I stopped answering. By Tuesday afternoon, I drove downtown and parked across from the Nexra building. Through the lobby windows, I could see employees packing up their offices, abandoning the sinking ship. The food trucks I used to visit during lunch breaks were gone. There were no customers left to feed. I thought about all those years of long days, of weekends spent optimizing systems and fixing problems that no one else understood. I thought about the pride I had felt when Nexra went from a small startup to an industry leader, handling billions in transactions every day. And now, they'd thrown it all away for a $180,000 salary savings. Wednesday morning brought news that Nexra Labs was filing for bankruptcy. Assets would be liquidated to pay creditors and settle with clients. I deleted the article without finishing it. Thursday, I started my new job at a private equity firm in Luxembourg. Triple salary. Full relocation package. 5-year contract. They had found me, not the other way around. Apparently, news travels fast in the database architecture community. And that was it. The end of an era. What do you think about Michael's actions? Was he justified? Or did he go too far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. And if you're all about stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next twist we've got coming your way. Let's build this community together, one shocking story at a time.